There is a strange kind of loneliness that doesn't look like loneliness at all. A quiet, invisible ache that follows a person everywhere, into crowded rooms, into warm homes, into conversations where they smile at the right time, nod at the right time, exist at the right time, but never fully arrive. Some people aren't dead, but they stopped feeling alive a long time ago. They move through the world like ghosts wearing human skin. And if you clicked on this video, maybe you know exactly what I mean. It's not just sadness. It's not depression in the click sense. It's the feeling that your life is happening around you, not with you. Like you're watching yourself through glass, unable to step inside your own story. Psychologists call this a form of dissociation. But the people who live through it don't use that word. They describe it more simply. I feel like I'm floating. I feel like I'm not real. I feel like I'm here, but not here. I feel like a ghost. This usually doesn't start in adulthood. It begins young, quietly, subtly, during moments when a child learns their presence doesn't matter, when their voice goes unheard, when their emotions go unseen, when their pain goes unacknowledged. So they start stepping back, just a little at first. A small retreat inside the mind, a little silence to stay safe, a little emotional distance to avoid being disappointed again. But over the years, that small retreat becomes a permanent home, and the world stops feeling like a place they belong. It becomes a place they simply move through. These people don't want to disappear. They didn't choose to feel this way. The truth is painful. They faded because no one ever taught them how to stay. And now, as adults, they carry a strange contradiction. They desperately want connection, yet they feel like they aren't part of anything. Not their family, not their friendships, not their community, not even their own memories. When they think about themselves, it's blurry, uncertain, as if they're describing a character they once knew, not the person they are now. They often say things like, I don't know who I am anymore. I feel like I'm watching someone else live my life. I feel disconnected from everything. I don't feel real. This isn't drama. This is a psychological defense mechanism. When someone grows up in emotional chaos, unpredictability, criticism, or neglect, the mind protects them the only way it knows how. By pulling them away from their own feelings, by muting their presence, by turning them into observers rather than participants. And once a mind learns to hide, it doesn't easily come back. These people become excellent listeners, but terrible receivers. They can soothe others, but can't feel comfort themselves. They are good at disappearing emotionally, mentally, energetically whenever they feel overwhelmed. Not because they want to be ghosts, but because being fully present never felt safe. And this is where their story begins. There is something haunting about a person who is physically present but emotionally unreachable. You can speak to them, sit beside them, even look directly into their eyes, but it's like trying to hold a shadow with your hands. People who feel like ghosts while still alive didn't choose this state. It didn't happen suddenly. It happened slowly, quietly, piece by piece, year after year, until something inside them just faded. And the saddest part, no one noticed the fading except them. They remember the exact moment it started. A betrayal that cut too deep. A humiliation they never recovered from. A loss that hollowed them out. A childhood where love was conditional or unpredictable. A friendship that disappeared without explanation. A life event that made them feel replaceable, invisible, unnecessary. But the real fracture wasn't the event itself. It was the realization afterward. No one saw what this did to me. This is where ghosthood begins. Not in the trauma, but in the silence that followed it. When you break, but the world keeps moving. When you scream on the inside, but speak normally on the outside. When you show up for others, but no one shows up for you. So they learn to retreat. Not dramatically, not obviously, just gradually. They stopped arguing. They stopped expecting. They stopped revealing their emotions. They stopped asking for help. They stopped believing they mattered. People assume ghosts are quiet because they have nothing to say. But the truth is darker. Ghost-like people are quiet because they were punished every time they tried to speak. Punished with indifference. punished with mockery, punished with misunderstandings, punished with abandonment. Every time they opened up, someone shut them down. Every time they reached out, someone pulled away. Every time they trusted, someone used it against them. Eventually, emotional silence became a survival strategy, and once silence becomes safety, it becomes home. Now they drift through rooms without taking up space. They walk through conversations without leaving a trace. They spend days on autopilot, thinking thoughts too heavy to share. Their body functions, their face smiles, but their inner world is empty corridors and locked doors. People around them say things like, "Are you okay? You seem distant. You've changed." They nod and say, "I'm fine." What else can they say? How do you explain to someone that you are alive, but your soul is somewhere else? How do you admit that you feel translucent, unreal, untouchable? How do you tell someone that you don't feel like a person anymore? Ghost-like people don't crave attention. They crave understanding. They crave safety. They crave someone who sees past the mask and notices the trembling beneath it. But here's the truth that even they don't like to admit. Ghosts are not born. Ghosts are made. They are made by emotional neglect, made by loneliness that lasted too long, made by being needed but never cared for, made by carrying everyone else's pain but having no one to carry theirs. They became ghosts because the world taught them that existing quietly was safer than existing loudly, and so they drift, unseen, unheard, untouched, but deep inside, something still burns, a small, fragile spark of personhood, waiting for someone or something to give it permission to come alive again. There is a very specific kind of exhaustion that belongs only to people who feel like ghosts while still alive. It's not physical. It's not even emotional in the usual sense. It's the exhaustion of being present, but never fully existing in anyone's reality. These people walk into a room and instantly shrink, not because they want to, but because every experience in their life has taught them that shrinking is safer, that disappearing is easier, that fading out of the spotlight is the only way to avoid being hurt, rejected, misunderstood, or judged. And so, little by little, they learn a heartbreaking skill: how to be there without taking up space. You'll see it in their body language: shoulders slightly forward, hands tucked in, eyes glancing away before they ever make contact, voices soft, controlled, careful, like they're afraid a single wrong word could tear the world apart. Because to them, it feels like it could. People who feel like ghosts didn't become this way overnight. Their invisibility was built, brick by quiet brick, moment by ignored moment. It starts when they're young, when their feelings were too big for the room, when their sadness made others uncomfortable, when their joy was dismissed, when their words were talked over, when their fears were minimized, when they learned that being themselves cost more than it gave. And somewhere deep in their psyche, a switch flipped. If no one listens, why speak? If no one sees me, why exist loudly? If I always end up alone, maybe I'm meant to stay unseen. This is the psychology of the living ghost. They begin to believe that their absence makes more sense than their presence. Not because they want to disappear. That's the tragedy. But because disappearing feels expected, natural, automatic. These are the people who don't text first, not because they don't care, but because they think they're bothering you. They don't interrupt, not because they're polite, but because they assume what they say doesn't matter. They don't share their needs, because they convince themselves their needs are too much. Being a ghost is not about loneliness. It's not even about isolation. It's about living inside your own life like a visitor, like someone who doesn't fully belong to it. People talk around them, not to them. Days pass through them, not with them. They watch their own life from the side, like an observer, not a participant. And worst of all, they get good at it. They perfect the art of walking quietly, existing softly, fading politely. But inside, deeper than anyone ever sees, there is a scream, a silent, buried, suffocating scream. I'm still here, why does no one feel me? Ghosts aren't dead. They're just unseen, and that invisibility becomes a cage they don't know how to break. But every ghost has a story, a moment where fading began. And to understand them, you have to go back to the origin of the disappearance. There comes a moment in the life of a living ghost when they stop trying to convince the world that they exist, not because they want to disappear, but because they're tired of explaining their loneliness to people who never really listen. People who feel like ghosts while still alive don't fade all at once. They fade slowly, quietly, in pieces. They disappear in the small moments, first, when they walk into a room and no one notices, when they speak and others talk over them, when they share something personal and someone laughs, when they finally decide. It's easier to say nothing. Ghosts aren't born. They're sculpted. Sculpted by a lifetime of being unheard, unseen, misunderstood. And so they begin to detach. Not dramatically, not with fights or tears, but with a subtle emotional retreat, like a soul stepping backward into a doorway no one is looking at. They start to give shorter answers, then none at all. They stop volunteering their opinions because they assume no one cares. They stop reaching out because they assume no one would notice if they didn't. People think ghosts are cold, but they're not. They're numb. Numb from too many disappointments. Numb from carrying emotions that never found a safe place to land. Numb from learning that expressing their needs only leads to silence. And this numbness becomes a shield. Thin, fragile, but effective. It helps them move through life without hurting every time they're overlooked. It helps them survive the noise of a world that never truly heard them. It helps them function in a society obsessed with visibility while they remain transparent. But here's the darkest truth. Ghosts don't fear being alone. They fear being present and still unseen. They fear sitting across from someone who supposedly loves them and still feeling invisible. They fear being in a crowded room and still feeling like an outline. They fear sharing their thoughts and watching them float past people like smoke. And so they master the art of silent existing. They show up where they need to. They function. They smile politely. They keep conversations shallow to avoid the pain of being misunderstood. They pretend to be fine because explaining their emptiness feels impossible. Life becomes a performance, a soft blur of routines and responsibilities, with their true self drifting somewhere just outside the frame. And no one knows. Not because ghosts don't want to be known, but because they are terrified that if someone truly looked at them, really looked, they'd see nothing worth holding onto. That's the curse of the living ghost, to desperately want connection, yet believe their existence is weightless. But the truth is ghosts don't want to disappear. They want one moment, one person, one voice that says, "I see you. You matter. You are still here." And until that happens, they continue drifting, visible enough to be acknowledged, invisible enough to be forgotten, alive enough to function, empty enough to feel unreal, a soul flickering at the edges of its own life. There comes a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when the ghost begins to realize something shocking. They were never dead, just numb. And numbness is not an ending. It's a pause, a survival mechanism, a psychological winter. But even winter holds one truth. It is not permanent. The moment of sudden recognition, it usually happens in the smallest, most unexpected ways. A stranger says something kind. A song hits too close. A memory returns. A tear slips out without permission. And for a second, just one, the person who feels like a ghost suddenly feels real. Not fully alive, not fully present, but aware. Awareness is the thin crack in the numbness, and every crack is the beginning of light getting in. The first sign of return, when they start asking why. Ghost minds don't ask questions, they just drift. But when someone starts asking, "Why do I feel this way? Why did I disappear? Why can't I connect? Why does everything feel distant?" This is the first sign of revival, because ghosts don't question their existence, but humans do. And these questions are not weakness, they are proof of consciousness returning. They are proof that the person is searching for their shape again, searching for the outline of themselves, searching for the version they lost. The painful part, returning hurts coming back to life, is not beautiful at first. It's not inspirational. It's not gentle. It's uncomfortable, messy, raw. When numbness fades, emotions return all at once. The grief they avoided, the loneliness they buried, the anger they swallowed, the needs they denied. It crashes into them like a tidal wave. This is why so many people stay ghosts, because feeling again is terrifying. But here is the deeper truth. Feeling is proof you are not gone. Pain means the soul is waking up. Sadness means the story is still unfolding. Fear means life is close enough to touch. To hurt is not to fail. To hurt is to heal. The beginning of realness. Reappearing in small ways. People who felt like ghosts do not return dramatically. They return quietly. One boundary. One honest conversation. One moment of courage. One tiny expression of who they really are. They stop performing strength. They stop pretending calm. They stop forcing a mask. They allow themselves to exist imperfectly. That is how life returns. Not through transformation, but through permission. The final truth. Ghosts aren't dead. They're invisible, and invisibility can be undone. Someone who feels like a ghost while still alive often believes, I don't matter. No one sees me. I'm impossible to understand. Irreplaceable. But these are wounds, not facts. Humans vanish when they are overwhelmed. Humans dim when they are hurt. Humans disconnect when they are unprotected. But they never stop being human. They never stop having a heartbeat that wants to be heard. A mind that wants to be understood. A self that still wants to return home. The closing message: if someone feels like a ghost, it is not because they are empty. It is because they have spent too long carrying everything alone. Ghosts don't need resurrection. They need recognition. They need softness, safety, and a space where they don't have to disappear to survive. They need a reminder. You are not invisible. You are not gone. You are not finished. You are still here. And that alone is enough to begin again.